Hey there, welcome to Unwrapping Wine. I'm one of your hosts, Randall Voss.
And I'm Anne Zwink.
This is the second part of our discussion with Tom Plocher, and in this episode we get into a little bit more of a macro discussion. We discuss how breeding more resilient wine grape cultivars can help handle the adverse weather events we're seeing. We also talk about Petite Pearl, which was Tom's first wine grape release, and we talk about what traits Tom thinks the vines and wines will have regardless of where it's grown. And we also close out the episode discussing what wine styles cold hardy wine grape cultivars are currently not filling and where we could use more work in grape breeding. So we're going to dive right into Tom, getting into where he sees potential plantings of his cultivars. We hope you enjoy this episode, and please contact us to provide us any feedback. Where do you maybe see the growth of where your varieties might go to?
Oh gosh, that's so interesting. Because our sales have kind of slowed down in the Midwest, kind of in the traditional cold hardy area. So Andy and I have been looking in other places for quite a few years for these wines. One real hotbed for these wines is Colorado right now. That area where they grow peaches on the west slope of the Rockies there, Grand Valley. Their winters aren't all that cold, but they can get really nasty cold spells late in the fall. 3 years ago, they had 15 degrees one night on the 15th of October. And it's mostly vinifera vines still. It's 80% vinifera vines. The vinifera vines, like their Cabernet Franc, still wasn't harvested, and all their vines had green shoots and green leaves. They took a huge hit from that. So now and they had enough cold hardy varieties growing to notice that this didn't bother them at all, because we had harvested them 6 weeks ago and the wood was completely hardened off and the leaves had fallen off, and they went through that cold snap just fine. So there's quite a bit of Petite Pearl there, and it seems to be a really great place to grow Verona because it's so hot they can ripen it up perfectly. It develops numbers there that I've never seen anywhere else. So yeah, Colorado's a good place. British Columbia just had a really bad winter disaster for the second year in a row. The Okanagan Valley up there, that is 100% vinifera. 30 years ago, they used to have a lot of hybrids, but they tore those out and planted vinifera. They had 2 nights in January, Friday and Saturday night in Kelowna there, which is right in the heart of it by the lake. They had 18 below zero one night and 22 below zero the next night. And the bud testing data from the field station there showed that their viniferas had an LD50 of minus 13 at the time. And so now they've had a couple of weeks to figure out the damage, and they have 100% crop loss going. And last year,
this coming harvest, right?
But it's coming for this coming year. Yeah. And last year they had 60% crop loss. They had a cold snap in January, not quite this bad, but they lost half their crop. So now in successive years, it's a really dire situation. A lot of wineries are up for sale already, and some of them are going to go bankrupt. So I just hate to swoop in and take advantage of that, but we had started conversations with them a while ago about how maybe they should at least plant some cold hardy varieties on a part of their planting, just as insurance for when one of these cold events happens. And now I think that's probably going to happen. I know that the nurseries I work with who can sell into Canada are already getting phone calls about it. And they could long term, that's probably the only sustainable way they can maintain that big wine industry there. And I think that's kind of becoming clear. So I'm actually going up there to their winter conference next week, and it'll be real interesting to see talk to some of the growers I know there and see, what the situation is like on the ground and, what their plans are. Yeah. So BC is a good place. There's there are a lot of small wineries in Ontario developing outside of the Niagara region, and they're planting all cold hardy varieties. Nova Scotia is a small industry, but they had a polar vortex event last year that killed just about everything. They were mostly growing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Yeah, a few hybrids like Lackady Blanc. All the vinifers are dead and are going to be replaced.
Wow.
So those are all kind of non-traditional areas, or they're areas that are kind of where they've planted a lot of vinifera, kind of on the margins of where vinifera can survive, and they've been holding their breath for years and have gotten by, and now they're kind of seeing the reality of climate change, and I think they all believe that's probably going to happen again. So those are kind of the areas I've been looking at.
It's interesting how we have always, in the upper Midwest, we've always been considered the cold climate region. And we were going to ask you, are you looking to make any grapes for other regions that are not considered cold climate? But what it sounds like is, with climate change, we're all going to have some instance of cold climate here and there. And so we couldn't be in a better position. You couldn't be in a better position to help us weather the storm.
Yeah, that's really true. I sort of look at it as a sustainability issue. If you really want to have a sustainable winery and vineyard for 20 years, for the next 20 years, you kind of have to just assume these extreme events are going to happen and just plant accordingly, or at least plant part of your vineyard according to that. And so you can weather a year when maybe you lose half your crop, or 2 years in a row when you lose half your crop. I know you're a winery person too. And so how many years out of 5 can you afford to not have a crop on something before you go out of business?
Maybe 1. Every single year. I mean, we don't even age our stuff, and we don't age our wines very long, so we're bottling everything within a year of harvesting and then selling out of it. And if we didn't have a crop, then we have nothing to sell. So
that's yikes time. In the Okanagan, I think most of the wineries had a backlog of wine from the previous year. So they're not going to have a problem this season. They have wine to sell, but they don't have anything this year to make any new wine out of. And the stored wine is going to be gone after this season.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a really, really tough situation for them. Yeah. 1 out of 5. That's an interesting take on that too, because it really all depends on how quickly you sell the wine you make. And if you sell it all the same year, you can't afford a crop loss. The other thing about, most of our cold hardy varieties also have pretty decent disease resistance, compared to vinifera's. And that's going to be really important too. People are increasingly concerned about what gets sprayed on their grapes. I think there's some good marketing appeal to be able to claim that those grapes were grown on a really low spray program, and you can't really do that with vinifera's.
Absolutely. Yes. Randall and I have been talking about this a lot too, about how our varieties that we grow here, that you've helped breed and others have helped breed, they're going to be eco-friendly and green in a way. So.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think before we started recording time, I think you mentioned you thought your grapes were in 26 states and 3 provinces. Is that, I might remember that correctly?
Yep.
Okay. Any other European countries or Asian countries have interest, or is that not something you want to delve into?
Inland Desert Nursery they maintain a certified propagation block of my varieties, so they can sell sell in the states around them there, but they also can do exports. And so we did an export to Hokkaido Island on Japan 2 years ago. They have the rights to propagate 10,000 Crimson Pearl and 10,000 Petite Pearl. And that was so painful to get that done. But I had actually met producer there in person 2 times. And so we had a really good personal relationship. And we did all our communication through Google Translate, which made me kind of nervous. We had to work out a license agreement, and on his side, it was kind of complicated too, because the winery, it's a really big winery and vineyard there on Hokkaido. The winery is owned by the county. And so the person who actually had to sign off on this deal was the mayor of the county. So yeah, he had to make a pretty good argument about why this was a good idea, because it was such a hassle to everyone. And they had to go through quarantine for a year. And he was really lucky he got 100% take in quarantine on the cuttings. So they're in Japan, and there will eventually be a lot of them there. And he has the option of actually selling them to other people out of a nursery too. Eventually, they might do that. They have a huge greenhouse for vine propagation, and they do potted vines and tissue culture. And then they are in Europe too. Antes Vines in Germany imported them about 10 years ago, and there's really no market to speak of in Germany, because you can't use the disease resistance argument, because they have so many disease resistant grapes of their own there.
Okay.
But he has a distributor in Poland, and he in turn works with a distributor in Lithuania. So there are a few of those vines getting out. It's mostly Petite Pearl, I think, that survived the whole. There were 5 imported, and Petite Pearl, Verona, and this Veritas grape are the ones that survived the process. Crimson Pearl didn't make it, unfortunately, so they don't have that. And then they're in Canada too. I work with 2 nurseries, one nursery in Niagara and one in Quebec, and they provide vines to the one in Niagara, mostly to Ontario, but they're actually involved in British Columbia now too. And the one in Quebec works mostly in Quebec and then in Eastern Canada and the Maritime provinces. So he's the one who's kind of working on the Nova Scotia replant.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so they're out there. It's all about relationships. I've discovered. It took me a while to figure that out, but it's all about relationships with people, and that's worked out.
What do you think would be a trait that, no matter where it's grown, what's like one trait that you can think of that no matter where it's grown, Petite Pearl is always going to have this?
Oh, the late bud break.
Late bud break. Okay.
Yep, pretty sure it's always going to have the late bud break.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about in the winemaking world? Do you think it has like any very dominant aromas or tastes that we should always know? Okay, this is Petite Pearl.
Yes, yes. You would probably recognize it too. There's this descriptor people use. They refer to it as forest floor. It's that smell when you're walking through after a rainfall. You're walking down a trail through the woods, and there's this fresh green kind of sweet smell in the air, and a little bit of earth. Yeah, that's been described as forest floor.
Okay.
They almost always have that to some degree.
Okay. Kind of, okay, so earthy.
Is that
like
earthy?
black soil.
Black soil, yeah. In Iowa, it would be black soil.
In Iowa, it would be black. I think we need to figure out some way where we can get examples of Petite Pearl from all over the world and taste them together.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so much fun. That'd be so much fun.
Where do you we got people breeding grapes. We got the vinifera. We got the French hybrids. We got, Cornell, U of Minnesota, other private breeders. Where do you see this going? Do you see uh, just more and more varieties, and we're just using all of them? Do you see consolidation where, let's say St. Croix goes by the wayside and gets replaced with something else? Where do you see this going exactly in terms of, will there be regionalization of these cultivars, or do you think it'll be, like Cabernet and Chardonnay are well known everywhere, or do you think where do you see things going?
I think, I mean, it's a really big deal to replace a variety that you've worked with for a long time. And as a winemaker, um, you've really worked on making the best, figuring out how to make the best wine you can from that grape. And people are really hesitant to change. So I think nothing really happens very quickly. Starting new plantings, that's a different thing. And that opens up more possibilities for people, I think, to choose. And right now, I think the more choices people have, the better. It's going to allow them to better fit the variety to their situation, their site, and climate, and their market. So I think more varieties are better now. And geez, in Colorado, there in the Grand Valley, someone told me that they're growing 35 different varieties there, and it's because they're still trying to figure out which ones fit that region perfectly. And they're not. I mean, they have a lot of Cabernet Merlot and Chardonnay, but those are not necessarily the ones that are really doing well there. There's this odd grape called Terra d'Algo, vinifera grape, that is just the shining star in the Grand Valley right now. It's winning all these awards, and it's maybe a little bit hardier than the classic viniferas, and so they're having pretty good luck with it in the field. But yeah, they're doing this big experiment on a grand scale, and yeah, they really welcome trying new varieties. And I think that's going to be really good for them. They don't have to be known for Cab and Merlot. They can be known for really good Terra d'Algo, and that can be their identity. Just like we can be known for really good Petite Pearl.
It's going to happen.
That's good. Yeah.
Give us another 30 years. I was just listening about how it takes 20 years to grow a luxury brand. So 20 years from now,
Oh
there's
gosh.
going to be some luxury brands in the Midwest, not just Iowa.
And that kind of gets to this meta region thing that we were talking about in email at the last Vineyard. Jim Trustees from Wine America gave the opening keynote talk, and he had done this analysis that showed that if the 10 or 12 in northern tier states that grow cold climate grapes would actually cooperate, they would have 13% of the wineries in the US instead of like 0.5% per state or something like that. And he said, why are you people so isolated in states, and why don't you cooperate? You have potentially all this power if you would just cooperate and at least work on some sort of branding idea about cold climate grapes that transcends your state borders. And so that was kind of the challenge he left with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you go about doing that, but seems like that's a good way to get on the road to some more national recognition for some of our wines.
I could see that for sure.
Yeah, maybe you can do it.
So what I'm hearing is we Iowans and you Minnesotans, we all need to work together.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds fun. I'd come up to you guys anytime.
So in a small way, that's why we started Vineyard too, because we thought, because Vineyard usually brings people together from so many different states and different countries. I think we had people from, at the one in Burlington a year ago, I think we had people from 20 states or more and 10 countries, and everyone had this, is all people with the same interest, and every Vineyard always seems to be like that, with that really broad mix of people with the same interest in But we get together and we never really think about what we do once the meeting's over. We all just go back to our places and keep doing what we're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
instead of keeping that collective enthusiasm going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the idea of tasting I was thinking, we were at one idea that came out of this last vineyard was that we should try to the next one is going to be in 2025 in Vilnius in Lithuania, and we were having breakfast at the hotel before we all left on the last morning, and someone says, why don't we do like a vineyard sparkling wine exhibition for like the opening night, just the night when everyone kind of the open house greeting night, get people to bring their version of a sparkling wine from wherever they're from all over the world, and just feature that as an event, cold climate sparkling wines. And so I think we're going to try to do that, actually. And it is one of those things where you could begin to see some big picture like that.
Wow. That would be really cool.
One other kind of breeding question I have for you, Tom, is, some of these grape varieties are being promoted as the grandchild of, or offspring of a well-known wine grape or variety. Is that wishful thinking on our part sometimes? Is that just for name recognition? And in your experience, how strong is the correlation between the parent of this grape and the flavor of the grapes that its offspring or grandchildren or whatever? How strong is that correlation from your experience?
In terms of acidity and tannin, it's pretty significant, I think.
Okay.
In terms of flavors and aromas, I just almost never see that.
Okay.
I do have one that I was kind of excited about this fall, that has Cabernet Franc as a grandparent or great grandparent, I think, and that wine definitely had that green bell pepper,
Oh,
a lot of it,
methoxypyrazine.
yeah, just a little of it, just enough of it that you say, oh, this is probably in the Cabernet family somewhere, isn't it? But that hardly ever happens. I was delighted that it did, because it's a really good wine, besides the little Cabernet touch. But yeah, it doesn't happen much. I think it is mostly marketing sake.
Okay.
People say that, and it's put a lot of people on. They when they taste it, they'll say, "Oh, I get it. I get the Pinot Noir in this."
One of the reasons I asked that is I used to help run the Mid-American Wine Competition, and sometimes when we had a newer cultivar, people would always, the wine judges would ask me what the parents are, and I was always really hesitant to say it because I thought like I was being suggestive and putting it in their head rather than it is what it is. So I always hesitated to say it because I wasn't 100% certain like that it was accurate. And the other reason, I think it's either a Noire or a Crow Noir out of Cornell. I think one of the parents was Steuben, and you think it's or the grandparent, something like that, and you think Steuben is a little bit Concord-esque, depending on where it's grown, and you don't get any of that from either of those cultivars, and so that kind of opened my eyes. Like, there's not always this direct correlation.
No, there isn't, and that was the right thing to do, to not tell them.
Well, I caved at some point, so
if you told them it was Steuben, they would have thought, oh, I get the foxiness in here.
Yeah.
It must come from the Steuben.
Do you see any other gap? Cold hardy varieties that more have come out. Are there any gaps you see in flavor profiles or anything like that you think we really need something to fill this niche in cold hardy varieties? In any particular, I know I don't always like to use vinifera analogs, but what gap is there right now in terms of varieties that you see we still need something that's more cold hardy?
When I kind of think of wine styles, around the world, I think a lot of our cold hardy whites kind of fit into either kind of that Sauvignon Blanc sort of mold, or kind of more of a Germanic kind of Muscat or kind of Riesling mold, and there's just not much that's very French, in style. When I think of, like, one of my favorite wines is just kind of basic Chenin Blanc, and I can't think of anything we have like that. A Clarion might. No, Clarion's pretty fruity too. A Clarion might be a little bit like that when that gets out there. And we don't have any Chardonnay analog I can think of, or any, those Rhone Valley whites are so wonderful too, and Vouvray, Semillon. So I don't know if somehow we haven't really cracked that part of it, and that's part of what I'm interested in doing with the whites selections I'm making. I don't have any Chardonnay like ones. I've used a lot of Chardonnay parents, but I don't have any Chardonnay like wines. But I do have some that are kind of along the lines of Chenin Blanc, and I think there's a place for that.
Absolutely. I think 100% that is exactly what we're missing. Yeah, you're going down the right alley.
That's good feedback.
From a winemaking standpoint, I think we could absolutely use that. We are always having people ask us for something to fill in those holes.
Oh, you are? Wow, that's really good feedback. Yeah, appreciate that.
And you got any other questions, or Tom, you have any other topics we need to hit here? Or?
Gosh, we covered a lot of things.
We did.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack. I'm so excited to have heard all of this firsthand.
Yeah, cool. Gus, it's so much fun talking with you.
We're fun people, Tom.
We're fun people. Why did it take so long for us to get together and talk?
No, we very much appreciate it. And I think the late bud break in your varieties it's super important given variability in climate, and it just gives people a little extra insurance. And so I've often told other breeders like you need to focus on that. And so it's very much appreciated in your cultivars that we have that. So
thank you. Yeah.
If our listeners would like to follow along and hear about when your next varieties are going to be released, can they do that? Are you posting this information anywhere, or how do they go about finding that?
Sure. So after all these years, I finally started an Instagram in December. I now have about 20 posts on there. Not all grape related, but most of them are. So that's where I would do it.
Okay.
I would post. I posted something about the new white selections on there about a month ago. That's cool. And about the tasting we did. It's Plocher_vines is my Instagram. Yeah, Plocher_vines. PLOCHER_vines. I have a web page too that I just redid 2 years ago, and that has a lot of really detailed information. So for people who want to really read about these varieties, that's the place to get it. That's all. It's all up to date. But
and that's plochervines.com.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. I don't revise that very often just because it's really painful to do it. It's much easier to do Instagram posts and get information out quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to have people visit my Instagram.
Awesome. We will do that.
Okay. I'll look for you on there.
Thanks for listening. Check out the Unwrapping Wine podcast on Facebook and Instagram for information about the show and upcoming episodes. We're also on unwrappingwine.com.